Education, and it's a budget meeting. So let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. There we go, right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pauletta Frias, Judy Fouché,
Here.
Scott Latham, John Crean,
Here.
Brian Tobin.
Here.
In the event of an emergency, all the visitors in here are advised that they may exit the room from the one side door which leads directly into the parking lot. In the event of an emergency, everyone is asked to move away from the building and do not attempt to leave in your automobiles, since this may cause traffic problems and block incoming emergency vehicles.
All right, well, I will turn this over to Dr. Morrow and Mr. Scheid, and after that, we will have one order of business, which is to adopt the budget tonight.
You want to move out there, or?
Is it easier if we go out there?
Or turn
Can you-
around? We can
yeah.
turn.
You're going to have to move out the other way.
Yeah. They can all just turn, I'll jump on the other side. So it's all yours, Chuck.
All right. All right.
Okay, good evening. Tonight's my pleasure to kind of come up with, bring up a summation of the budget process for the proposed budget for next year. It's interesting that this year it's a little earlier than usual. Usually we have a budget meeting, say roughly tonight, and we adopt in another week or so. Because of the dates, we have to adopt or vote for it tonight. So I'm going to go through some slides. We have really a lot of summary of the information from the past budget meetings. A couple of the highlights for the 22-23 budget. We're looking at a budget-to-budget increase of 1.9%. That drives a tax levy increase of only 1.71%. And we are under the tax cap, the formula that's used to, they guide on what numbers used in debt service and so forth, what numbers our levy can go by. And again, we're under the tax cap, so we only need 50% for the voters to approve. Same budget to budget, or maintains all the programs, staffing at the same levels as this year. State aid's approximately $37,000, hasn't changed. Over the weekend, there was the final state aid numbers that came out. And I know the first thing went right to the bottom line for Southold, and it showed $108,000 increase. And I was like, wow, very shocked and surprised. But of course, when you look at the details every year, it seems like they come up with a little nuance or a little something different, and this year it's the universal pre-K program. So we've had a universal pre-K program which is funded. They're looking to give us an additional $108,000. So we're looking into it. With the universal pre-K program, it's not part of the general fund. It's in we keep that separate with our other grants in the special aid fund. So this money doesn't affect this budget. You know, granted, it's nice to have, and we're going to look into it, of course, and see if there's potential, if it's worth it, and so forth, and the program side of it. But it doesn't affect our general fund. We don't run the pre-K program through a general fund budget. We run it separately. We outsource it. So unfortunately, again, that state aid spike, which is, I think it was an extra $100 million just for universal pre-K, we do get a slice of it, but like I said, it doesn't affect our general fund budget. So just we have one slide with comparison, one slide for revenue, one on expenditures. So for revenue, what's interesting, we see the 21-22 column, and to the right is the proposed 22-23 column. And it's interesting, again, we know that the tax levy, of course, is the biggest chunk of our budget. Of the $32 million, $28 million and change comes from the tax levy. In my opinion, I mean, it's good and bad. It's good that we don't necessarily rely on the state aid. If there is a cut in state aid, it affects us, but maybe not as much as larger districts. So again, it's good and bad. Again, you see we have a slight uptick for state aid. A lot of the other lines are fairly, the tuition in sports, the tuition, out-of-district tuition I did lower it a little bit to kind of not rely on out-of-district, again, tuition as much as we have been. The ROT, again, we have federal funding, roughly the same, and same thing with the ROTC from the other schools. Miscellaneous, I know the big amount was the interest has been low with the lower interest rates with the banks. And fund balance and reserves, we typically keep it roughly the same. It goes up and down. It did drop a little bit with the appropriated fund balance number, but we still use the reserves as a revenue source and fund balance based on in the budget.
That's a combination, I'm sorry, of both reserves
It's-
and
Correct.
fund balance, general fund balance that we're pushing back in.
Exactly. So I mean that the fund balance number, the appropriated fund balance number, is a number we. In the past, it was high. It was almost $1 million, which I believe is just hard to manage because sometimes you really have to put that buffer in the budget each year. Otherwise, you have to raise taxes for it. So we're at 300, 400,000, which is right where you want to be. And like I said, sometimes depending on how the numbers this year, the numbers were working out pretty well, so it was a slight drop. But it's going to be roughly flat with those numbers. Again, I picture next year will be a little bit up and down. So it's up and down. Again, we definitely use the reserves, again, which is what they're there for. The good years, we've been saving them and then be using them so we don't have to raise the tax levy as high. The big number this year is pilot. We've had pilot in the past, but never a significant amount. And what's interesting with the pilot, as I mentioned with earlier budget meetings, is that there's no agreement, but basically the town has told us that there's a plot of land, LIPA, that's coming off the tax rolls, and we're going to receive pilot. We received pilot this year, and it seems like we're going to continue it. So what that does, budget-wise, it doesn't have any really change. It reclasses how we don't receive it as a tax levy. It comes in as pilot. So for us, again, the whole thing in the $32 million, it doesn't really matter. But for the taxpayers looking at, because this year when it jumps on in the budget, the tax levy had a drop. The tax levy increase was roughly 2.3, 2.4% without the pilot. That was our cap. Now it's like 1.71% because we're not raising the money from pilot. It's coming in. It's from a separate check. So in the whole scheme of things, again, we're made whole, but it's just a reclass on where that money comes from. The other thing when pilot comes off when we stop collecting the check and say the properties go back on the tax roll, there's going to be an increase in the tax levy. So again, pilot is part of the tax levy cap formula, and $184,000 is a substantial amount for us. We're going to keep an eye on it. You can still get more information. But like I said, that's the interesting part where, again, it comes in as a separate line item and a separate, like I said, not a tax levy. And you see, again, our total proposed budget is the $32,205,000, an increase of 1.9%. Just a summary of the expenditure budget. So every school district in New York State follows the same grouping, the count codes. So these are the same categories all districts follow, and this is just the summation in those different categories. Again, the top board, the central, it's offices like the business office. Those are a lot of the administrative expenses you can see is roughly flat at $1.8 million. The maintenance, facilities, custodial, keeping the building safe, that's bumped up a little bit to the $2 million. And now we're starting the curriculum supervision. That's where you're getting into the really supporting teachers. It's the principals, their office, salaries, and those items to give the tools for the teachers. This is roughly the $1 million. And of course, the meat and potatoes, the instructional programs, the teachers' salaries, textbooks, supplies, all that. The bulk of the budget is going just a slight uptick to the $16,189,000. Our transportation is anything roughly a slight increase. We do have over a 4% increase in our contractual obligation. We use Sunrise Bus. However, we're having less bus runs, so overall the transportation it didn't go up as high as the consumer price index would have warranted. Benefits, again, another big piece of the budget. We see a slight uptick. Health insurance, 4%. The TRS rate is going up a little bit. So overall, again, not too bad from a percent point of view. In the last category, capital, debt service. This might be something in the future we'll talk about how we will continue to fund capital projects in the school district. We spend roughly $750,000 for bond payments. I think we have about 9 years left. In our state, we have a slight, this year, decrease in enrollment, and our buildings are in good shape. Doesn't seem like we're bursting at the seams. So it might be something we would look at, maybe not bonding and continue maybe using a capital reserve, interfund transfer, another mechanism to keep the buildings new, safe, but potentially not having to bond, or maybe not bond as much. Again, might be definitely a conversation maybe for another day, just to kind of get everybody thinking. Again, just say it out there that there's other options for the for debt service. And of course, the same total numbers, the $32,205,000 is the total budget proposed. So an estimated tax billing, I had mentioned 1.71% would be the increase. The average house, the town has mentioned to me, is assessed at $7,000. So using that number, that increase annually be $111 or $9 per month. To calculate it on your own, the tax would be $93.771 for every $100 of assessed valuation. And this estimated increase would be 1.581 per $100 of assessed valuation. And again, that's the information if you ever wanted to, based on what your house is assessed at, you can calculate how much your taxes would be and what the increase would be. I look at the 1.71% is the assessed valuation basically as of now. It changes roughly every December. And again, I just make the assumption we have no control over the assessed valuation, so we keep that flat. I did notice in December 21 was the first year the assessed valuation went down. Usually it goes up. But like I said, that's best. We use the most accurate current information for the assessed valuation. This is a little bit trying to give was that 8 years back or more of the tax levy increase. So you can see with the percents on the left, going from 2014-15 on, and you can see we've typically been under 2%. We had 1 year, 1920, where it went up to 3%, and I believe that was the year we had the 2% consumer price index, and we had almost, I think, a full 1% tax growth rate, which is very unusual. Again, that's something with the brick and mortar change that we don't have control over, and there's really nothing to really judge what next year will be. But so based on those factors, again, we were close to 3%. But again, you can see over the average, like I said, we're typically hovering 1.75%. It looks like 1.8. Now the budget, same thing, looking back on just a little bit of the history. Again, maybe the high of 2.7% way back in 2014-15. And same thing, we typically hover just under 2%. And again, I think it's, schools are very budget-to-budget oriented, and we try our best, but we also try and factor in some long-term mechanisms to help keep the budget and the tax levy increase relatively flat, trying to avoid spikes. And I think we overall, as a district, been fairly lucky. Retirements and other certain items that just help the budget year after year. What else? Yeah, again, it seems like it's a pretty good story, a pretty good reflection on how we are doing overall as a district. Again, this slide was just a repeat, just important because there's a lot of information out there, a lot of grants that we're dealing with, and somehow I just want to make sure it's clear that, again, this is not general fund money, and what I'm saying is the two groups of money. One is the American Rescue Plan, where the government has stepped in and allocated $1.1 million to us, and that is items we are continuing to look at, but it's areas to get kids back into the buildings, improve air quality. I think we're doing some work at the elementary for the temperature controls. Just anything we can do, we're using. But it's important to know that money is to supplement the budget, not supplant, which again means we can't really take money out of the budget. Could be using items that potentially in a year or two would go into the budget. But again, it's used to supplement, not supplant. And like I said, this is money. The American Rescue Plan doesn't go into general fund. It's money's there. We're getting, so we're spending it, and by the time when it's due, again, we'll claim for it, and again, we'll maximize every dollar. The other, the CRISA, I call it, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Money, again, another grant, a little shorter, $524,000, only 2 years, same thing, not general fund. A lot of areas, again, PPE, health and safety, educational technology, we're using a chunk for computers and Chromebooks and such. So same thing, we're starting to spend it. That one we'll try and probably spend earlier since it's a shorter gap. It's due sooner than the rescue plan. But like I said, it's great to have. I'm very surprised that we have received so much, and we'll take advantage of it. But like I said, to keep repeating myself, it's not general fund, but it's out there. And again, we're going to use it. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Or let me know if you want me to go back on any of the slides.
So I did have one on that additional 108 that we were talking about. That could be used to extend our UPK to full day, possibly.
We're looking for the parameters of it. There's been a push in the state to go to full-time UPK. So I don't believe the monies are, I don't think we can utilize them to increase the number of students. I think we can utilize it to increase the length of the day. But I'm not sure yet. You know, there were a number of districts that piloted this year. I reached out and asked about it. It was too late for this year. I did that over the summer.
Right.
But there's been a big push. It's like Chuck said, that money comes from federal grants.
Right.
You know, it's not the same. Some of it comes from federal grants. Some comes from state grant, right?
Well, I can interrupt you. It's tricky because it's in the guidelines for the instructions for the UPK. There's two types. There's enhanced money, enhanced program. That's federal. Still, right? So that's special aid fund federal. The other piece, it's state. Now, that's what we have, universal pre-K. It's state money, but we still track it separately in the special aid fund just to keep it separate and expenses, keep things cleaner. So it's kind of a combination. I do agree. It's definitely a big push for a full-day program.
Right, but it's really sad if it's a full-day program, but we exclude kids in our district because they cap the numbers. You know what I mean? Like, it's, at some point,
I was able to work with the state last year that we didn't have to exclude any kids this year. We took more
Right.
than we've ever had
Right.
under the grant because some of the other grants we have, one of the allowable expenses is UPK. And
Right.
we were not utilizing some of that grant money.
Right.
So we didn't take away from any other program that we were utilizing grant funds for.
Right, right.
So I think there'll be other options, and just based on the number, if it's 108, including the 54 we used to have, I don't think there'll be exclusions.
Right, it would be nice if we could, you know, it would be nice if they would put the grants out
Yes.
that way and say, this is, you know, and
Yeah.
here's your money, figure out how much of a day you can offer, but make sure you offer it to everybody.
So my
Yeah,
hope is
so-
that we'll be able to offer to everybody.
Right, okay,
That's the hope.
right, okay.
It just came in over the weekend, so I don't have.
You don't
the
have enough
specifics
information on it yet, okay. Anybody else have any other questions for, no? No? Okay, well, with that being said, then I would seek a motion to adopt the budget recommended by the superintendent for the 2022-23 school year and the property tax report card to be submitted to the SED, and the total planned expenditure is $32,205,000. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, Brian, John, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion approved. That would be it, so, anything else? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.